everybody, we're going to get started.
So I'm not even sure I have.
Now, if you have a laptop, unless you're taking notes, I'd like to ask you to close it, please. Thank you. All right, so thank everybody for coming. I'm Sarita Stewart. The reason I get to introduce everybody is that I would like to make an appeal to you. I'm actually a researcher, and I actually am a teacher in the college of Curve College. And I'm looking at a model of artist fan consumption and how that drives money streams. So I don't know if some of you guys have already had a chance to take it, but if you go to curvecollege.info and you go to news and opportunities, there's this really huge picture of me. And if you go down there, there's an anonymous link to a survey. And I'm trying to do this so I can actually graduate from the University of Alabama this year. So I would ask you, it's anonymous, I can't trace it. If you took it, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and it's basically looking at your attitudes on music consumption. And there's a theoretical model that I'll probably talk about next year after I test all the assumptions. But you guys aren't here to take that. You're here to actually hear Dr. Cornwall interview his guests today, some of my old friends and students. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jeff.
All right. Well, greetings, everybody. Good to see a lot of familiar faces again. And how many? Do we have one more after this, or is this it?
We have one more, right, James?
Wow. All right. So this is coming to the end of a great year of entertainment industry entrepreneurship seminars, and I've had a lot of fun, and participation for you guys has been great this year, so we appreciate it. Today we've got with us, we've got Jeff Tweel, and he's brought a couple associates, Chris, who works with him in terms of artist acquisition, and Joanna, who is a graduate student here at Belmont and is working with them as well. So we're just going to have a conversation about sort of a fascinating new publishing company that you've created, and kind of learn a little bit more about how you got to where you are, and what you've got and where it's going. So why don't we start a little bit, Jeff, about kind of what was your background and kind of how have you gotten to this point so far?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and Professor Stewart and everybody in the Belmont staff for having us here today, and all of you for coming. At my age, that's a long story about where I've been, so I'll try to make it real short. I have been in Nashville since the early 70s. I came here as a songwriter and performing artist, had a major label record deal, had a pretty good career as a songwriter in the 70s and 80s. The money wasn't as big then as it is now. Didn't take you quite as far in those days. Somewhere about 20 years ago, I moved to the other side of the desk and got a job working at a publishing company. And for the ensuing 15 to 20 years, worked at 3 different publishing companies as managing director in the creative area, the last of which was the publishing division at Curve Records,
Okay.
Where I spent 8 years. Professor Stewart was there for some of those years, and that's how we know each other. So I have a background both on kind of both sides of the desk, so to speak, as a creative person myself, and then as a manager, so to speak, of other creative people, where I and a team of other people, exploited the works of other writers, and created a lot of good things for a lot of other people. The last few years I've been back in the world of just independent activity. I concentrated a little bit on my own songwriting career, a little bit of independent production. And then a couple of years ago, my son, who is a graduate of University of North Carolina as an undergrad and their law school, and also has an LLM in tax law from Georgetown. He's way more educated than I ever was. He never had any natural inclination or activity in the music industry, but having grown up in our household and seen it from the inside out, he always had a desire to do something entrepreneurial in it. And this idea, he came to me with this idea that ultimately became TweelX.com, to do basically a digital, just to take the conventional music publishing process and do it digitally and create basically a web space, a portal where we can build a catalog, develop and exploit. And exploit is a good word, by the way, in this context. A lot of people think the word exploit carries negative connotations, but that's a good connotation here. Exploit the works of writers and the writers themselves if they are also aspiring recording artists.
So,
And to do this online, excuse me, just to finish my thought, to do the whole process online, from the contracts and how, you know, we execute all of our paperwork online, and it's stored online at our site, and I can be more specific about that later. And then to create a platform, though, whereby other people can participate by, our original vision was to then take some of the publishing shares that we own when writers publish with us and offer them incrementally to investors who want to own pieces of publishing. In the conventional music industry world, people are buying and selling copyright shares or whole catalogs all the time.
so are these are individuals buying these shares?
They can be, or they can be companies,
Okay.
institutions.
And so are they buying into, what entity are they buying into at that point? What's the structure of how that works?
The structure is this: if a writer publishes with us, and our model is such that when we invite or recruit a writer to publish with us, we do so on a non-exclusive basis, meaning you, Mr. or Ms. Songwriter, can put one song with our catalog, or you can put a dozen, or you can put 100 if you like. We don't require you to put your whole catalog with us. We don't have a contractual going forward arrangement with you to publish everything that you write in the future. But if you put one or more songs with us, that song is like a commodity that is available at a trading platform to be purchased. Pieces of it are available. So to answer your question, the investor, so to speak, can buy a share in one song if they want, or multiple shares of multiple songs.
And so this could be anybody in here who would like to do that. They don't have to be accredited investors, or do they?
That's the interesting thing about the model. And without going way off into the weeds about
Let me do an aside here.
Okay.
Accredited investors. Some of you guys have heard about crowdfunding and all that kind of stuff that's going on. And you know, you've heard Kickstarter and all that. And they're trying to move Kickstarter to become, instead of gifts, investment. And one of the hurdles has been that to invest in a private business, you have to be what's called an accredited investor. And to be accredited, you have to have a certain level of wealth or a certain level of income. Now, by today's standards, it's not that high. It's $1 million in wealth and a couple $100,000 in income. But when this law was passed, which was like even before you and I were around, it was a lot of money. Today, there's about 10,000 accredited investors just in Nashville. So it's always a challenge when you have investment about whether this is something that is requires people to be an accredited investor. That's been the snag with Kickstarter becoming an investment kind of a scheme instead of a gift kind of scheme. Does that make sense?
Via general solicitation. The
Right.
key word there is
general solicitation.
general solicitation, meaning advertising, basically, via the internet or any other means.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to have these folks be accredited investors.
That's what's in the state of flux at the moment.
Because that's state by state too.
And that is state by state. So our original model was to limit it to accredited investors. So which would mean mainly, or where we started was with people in the music industry, various companies or individuals who could see the advantage of owning copyright shares. I mean, they see it anyway, and on a daily basis, they always want to acquire,
Right.
anybody from independent record producers, record labels, other publishers are always wanting to acquire more, and they fit the definition of accredited
Sure.
investor.
Yeah, a company is fine, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the Jobs Act of, 2011, I guess? Is
Yeah,
when,
2012. Yeah.
Or 2012. So what is current, the SEC is under a mandate currently to amend the laws
Right.
via the Jobs Act to loosen up that whole thing that you just explained.
Right.
The SEC is rather painfully dragging its feet. It's at least 6 months, if not 9 months to a year behind schedule
And there's
doing that.
there's a new head, and
Yes.
that's slowed things down even worse.
So yeah, the general solicitation provision is looming. Now, in January, in early January, we I hate to, it sounds like I'm bragging a little bit, but we kind of made history when we had an article written about us in the Nashville Tennessean that ultimately went national. It got picked up in USA Today and some other national outlets, and it led to a flood of activity to where we actually had some non-accredited investors coming onto our site and executing our business model and buying in a surge of activity that just really took us by surprise, frankly.
Right.
So we perceived that as like an initial offering, if you will, of stock. And we have now since put that on hold
Right.
for the moment.
Right.
Because we want to make sure that as the SEC comes around and removes that requirement, that we're not in violation of any securities law.
Correct.
We are not so far, and we don't want to be.
But we may be, because we don't know what they're going to say.
We don't know what they're going to say. I
Right.
mean, we have every indication to say that it's
Right.
going to. So in the meantime, our site also has other elements of crowdfunding, like Kickstarter. I mean, we
Right.
have features where you can use a digital tip jar and just and
I saw
and
the tip
donate.
jar thing, and gotcha.
Sure.
All right, well, and I'd love to have you back after the Jobs Act gets sorted out to kind of see where all this heads, because I'm working with a couple of other folks that are doing more traditional
Mhm.
crowdfunding kinds of models here in town, and students who have a class this semester heard him when he came to class, and it's in flux. And a lot of people in the meantime are doing what you're doing, is trying to figure out, well, what can I do now?
Yeah, and be.
Thank goodness you got a son who's a lawyer to deal with all this.
Well, that's a help. And
That's a big help.
And all of this was his vision, and he.
So
I mean,
where did a lawyer get the idea for this?
I don't know. He's
I mean,
again.
he's sitting there dealing with the minutia tax code, and all of a sudden there's like a spark.
Well, he's has kind of a Renaissance brain, I guess. He's again, having seen the music industry from the inside out, growing up, he just kind of had a thing for it. It's something that he wanted to participate in, but he's not. He's not a songwriter or a singer or a musician, so to speak.
Sure.
But he just had this drive to do this, and came to me with the idea. I had a couple of other ideas previous to this that I told him, they weren't very good. But this one had the ring of something really unique, a way that we could, our mission, if you will, or our goal is to, we all know how hard the music industry is to break into. I mean, 40 years ago when I started, it was incredibly hard. I think it's even harder now because it's so competitive. The industry, as we all know, is kind of undergoing this downsizing and shrinkage in the last 10 to 12 years. The doors are so closed to so many people wanting to get started. We're trying to remove some of those barriers of entry and perhaps provide a new portal of entry.
So eventually, and actually operationally now, so this is a place where people can go and invest in artists. It's a place where people can go in the industry and find artists, and so it's truly an artist clearinghouse, basically.
Yes, and
it's all digital. So these artists are anywhere?
They can be anywhere. Our catalog, our roster of artists, I'd say maybe 25% of them live in Nashville. The rest live at various places across the country. It's not limited to country music. Our catalog is
I saw
diverse,
that, yeah.
very diverse from a genre standpoint. And I will say that even though this is a digital concept, and again, we do everything from executing single song publishing agreements, I assume maybe some of you know what that is, and assignments of copyright and all that. It's all done online, and you create a profile, much like Facebook or Reverb Nation, for example, and everything you do is stored digitally at your profile page if you are a writer or artist. But what I also want to say is, behind all that is what I do every day, and my associate Chris and some other associates we have not in Nashville, and Joanna has joined us recently and hopefully will be more involved, and I hope she'll speak to that a little later, and Chris as well. What we really want to do is support everything we're doing digitally with a real conventional brick and mortar type publishing operation that ultimately is competing with, or in the same market space as the traditional publishing model. And that's what I do. They call me boots on the ground, I guess, because I'm taking that thing that we're creating digitally and reinforcing it with the human presence with the help of my associates, and doing the same thing that I did in many respects when I was in the brick and mortar world.
So some of the process, pitching and so forth, really works the same way?
Some of that is working the same way, yes.
Okay.
So, my contacts and our contacts in the music industry, we use it to promote ourselves digitally. Like you just mentioned, it's good for me to be able to tell people that you can come to our website and browse and surf and shop if you want, or the other way around. I can send people direct links to our songs.
It's a digital pitch, basically.
It's a digital pitch.
Interesting.
I
was going to tell me, you're out grabbing artists. That's kind of what you're doing, Chris. Is that
Sure.
right? So kind of tell me their reaction to this, because I'm in working with artists, and I'm not in the music business program. I'm an entrepreneur guy, but if you're Belmont,
You have to.
it's gonna, by osmosis, it's gonna get there eventually. So, how are the artists responding to this? Because what I'm hearing from them is, I don't want to deal with the old world, but part of the old world really is still the world. And what's their reaction?
It's with an artist knows more about publishing just in general, it's much easier to sell them, obviously, because it's kind of a difficult topic, like a difficult aspect of the business to grasp, or like how innovative it is.
Right.
So if they have a good basis in publishing, it's really pretty easy. Most of the time, if they get it, they'll be on board immediately. But a lot of the times, it takes a little bit of a push, a little bit of selling, because it is sort of brand new, and the old way gives them like a sort of a comfort level that they maybe don't necessarily get with the new way, but it also has other aspects of it.
I mean, when you come up with a radically new business model,
Right.
You got to educate.
Mhm.
And you're going to have to kind of take some time to get the world to kind of understand. So what's your pitch? How do you get them, how do you, we got a bunch of artists out here. What would you, if they're kind of going, I don't get this, how would you
Well, I mean, what
sell it to
really
them?
puts most people at ease is the fact that we do a song-by-song agreement, so there's really nothing to lose if you try our new model. There's only something to gain. Plus, we have a 2-year reversion clause, so if we don't do anything for you in 2 years, you get
Really?
all your rights back. So there's really, the only thing you're going to lose is time, but with this model, it reaches so many things, it has so many ways of generating revenue that you wouldn't in a traditional publishing agreement. So it just makes sense for a new artist to just at least give it a shot. And most of the time, we've had that happen where an artist will put up a couple songs, and then they'll end up uploading more.
And so you're seeing the market that this resonates best with are those emerging artists and breaking
Right.
in, and so you really haven't had much reach to more established artists at this point.
We haven't. yeah, we haven't really had too much reach. It's more, yeah, up and coming artists who we kind of have to find and generate a following on.
So how do you build something that going forward is sustainable and can grow and become a presence? How do you kind of get from just getting these new artists to getting the catalog that has some significant oomph behind it?
Short answer and the quickest way is what any other publishing company would do: try to have a breakthrough
Gotcha.
story, an event where an artist gets a song recorded by, a major act, or the artist breaks through themselves, maybe gets a record deal with a major label, again, through the exposure that we can hopefully help them
And
provide a breakthrough story.
And numbers are on your side because you're getting a whole lot more artists than a traditional publishing house would, it looks to me.
Yes, yeah.
So the numbers start to play on your side of having that happen.
It is a numbers game. I always heard that when I was in the,
I mean, that's what impressed me was just the volume you already had there. How many artists you guys have on the site now?
oh gosh.
It's a lot, right?
We have 50, maybe more than that.
Wow.
I actually haven't counted lately.
Yeah.
But a lot of songs and a lot of really good
So
ones.
that's a fast ramp up of a catalog there.
Yes, it is. And again, to reinforce the point that you two were discussing, the emerging artist, this has great appeal to them because they can't go knock on the doors of the major publishing companies if they can even find the doors.
Right.
The doors are generally closed
Right.
these days. So the discovery or the breakthrough event for an emerging artist is kind of leaves them scratching their head, and so we're just trying to offer them another means of exposure to people in the industry that is so user friendly to them. As Chris mentioned, we do it on a song by song basis. We have reversion. If we don't generate activity for you, the deal's off, so to speak.
And it's just like there's no cost to the artist, so there's no downside to them in terms of giving this a shot. So,
Right.
Are you having artists come to you? You said only 25% in Nashville. How do you find these other artists in other markets? How are they finding you?
A lot of the other artists are just generated through. We have some interns on college campuses that are creating buzz, and then we also have just from the articles and the national exposure we've got a lot of people coming through on there, and then Chase, he lives in Springfield, so we've got a handful of artists from there as well.
That's my son, Chase.
Oh, okay.
That's his name. I forgot to name him, by the way.
Well, you're supposed to name them when they're born, right?
Yeah, we did, I think.
That's a little oversight. Yeah.
His mother did. I was
Okay,
not
all right,
thinking about
all
it.
right. So what's your long-term strategy in terms of promoting this? I mean, how do you continue to spread this word? Do you have kind of a marketing plan in place, or?
We're hoping for the breakthrough, I think, is really where we're at. Pretty much it'll kind of promote itself. Getting out there and talking about it for right now is kind of just how we're playing it, and for like an overarching 5-year marketing plan, we don't have that right now. But
Okay.
We're developing it, I guess.
Sure.
you might
yeah,
say.
it's work.
So tell
As
me,
we go.
Tell me what you've learned and what surprises you've had, because with every business model that I've ever tried to execute, it's like 2 weeks in, I go, well, boy, that has to change. I wasn't expecting that. We talk about those as pivots in our world. And, what are some things you've had to kind of change and adjust since that first vision that you and your son had in terms of this?
Gosh, yeah, pivot. We've been pivoting a lot, seems like.
Which gets hard when your knees get old.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah. Yeah, it does. I anticipated this, but just the structural detail of a startup, particularly an internet startup, was new to me, maybe
Right.
because of my generation. So a lot of that kind of detail, legal and accounting detail, and building a website. I'm not a tech savvy person, nor is Chase necessarily. We couldn't build this ourselves. we retained a firm in the Midwest to do this, and what was kind of, I've heard.
You did a good job.
Well, thank you.
It's a good looking site.
Thank you. And
You
it's
all need to go out and take a look at this. TweelX.
TweelX.com. It's a highly funcking site too.
Well, not now, because you get yelled at if you open up the computer, so wait till afterwards. I've heard horror stories from entrepreneurs who hire web developers, and web developers misrepresent, and they say they can do this and they can't, and the guys are pulling their hair out, Yeah.
We were fortunate in that, we've had our share of bugs to iron out, but the tricky part for our developers was there was no blueprint for what we were asking them to do. It was totally uncharted territory, and not only did they not know anything about the music business, we had to kind of educate them about that. And then they go, "You want us to do what? Like, you want the site to do this?" Well, it's a fairly high functioning site in that
It is.
we track all these documents, we track royalty earnings and money changing hands, and you have a royalty statement at your profile page, whether you're an investor or an artist. So it executes a lot of. Not only does it look good, but it executes a lot of.
The impression I
functions.
got was not only was the front door rather complex in terms of what they have, and yet really good interface, and it looks like it's easy to use, but I started to imagine all the complexity behind that.
Yeah, it's quite complex behind it. So I guess that was the biggest, to go back to answer your question, the biggest challenge maybe for me was to kind of keep the website ahead of what we were, our first challenge was we had to, if you think of it as a store, we had to get some inventory, which was writers and artists with songs. Then we had to get some buyers or some shoppers to come in the door, which is our people that come to invest, so to speak.
Right.
And then we had to keep the daily task of keeping the website up to speed, because it seemed like every other week or so we'd say, "Oh gosh, well this happened and the website's not ready to handle this," and so we'd be on the phone with our web developer saying, "You got to do this, you got to fix this, and you got to upgrade this and update that." And
the only thing that had to be your advantage of that is that artists are kind of struggling right now, because that is really a chicken and the egg thing with artists and investors in this kind of model. Artists are going to, if they could be picky, they could say, well, where's your action going on?
Right.
Fortunately for you, you're able to build up a stable of artists and then sell that to the investors.
Yeah, yes.
Which is a huge advantage right
Yeah.
now. So let me turn over
Sure.
here for 1 minute.
Sure.
All right. You still awake?
I'm awake.
All right, cool. So you're getting an MBA,
Mm-hmm.
and you're about or you are jumping on board with a startup.
Yes.
So tell me about,
That's scary.
not to
No.
me, but to most MBA students, tell me about that decision and kind of what you see as an MBA, what you see as something that is attractive to you about this as an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by the model. I had a chance to actually meet Jeff at the first showcase that TweelX had done, and so I immediately afterwards jumped on the computer to look over the model and kind of see the way it functioned. And something you alluded to was I was really impressed by the website itself. And so the more I kind of looked into it, the more fascinated I was with its function. And as far as being an MBA student and kind of myself feeling compelled to kind of add to the industry as it's developing in this, with this new generation of people kind of entering, whether they be artists or business people, et cetera, is that it's really appealing to a crowd of young business people who grew up with technology versus perhaps the old school model of
Yes.
point-to-point contact and these close relationships. And while that's evident a lot in Nashville, I think when you think about the broad spectrum of the music industry, especially in places like New York or Los Angeles, the internet and technology are critical to the success and I think the breakthrough of a lot of artists. When we think about some people that have had great success, who've kind of come out of nowhere, it's been through platforms such as YouTube and things like that. So I think technology plays a huge role, and young business professionals and young artists are seeing that.
So where do you see this opportunity in your career? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Wow, that's a huge question. I mean, hopefully, I see great things for TweelX, and I'd feel absolutely privileged to be a part of the project as it develops, because I do see a lot of great things for it. As far as kind of getting feedback from artists, and something Chris had mentioned too, is that there's this level of transparency that was never present before, I think, when it came to the publishing world. And one of the things that I think appeals to a lot of artists now is that you realize, because the barriers of entry are there, and they're, I think, stronger than they ever were before, that you can't just be a creative mind, you also have to have a business mind. And I think that this model really does that. So when it comes to sort of this 10-year plan, I think that I'd like to sort of see my career evolve in that way, to also feel that that I can expand the education within the world of creative minds, because I think that's going to be what separates those who succeed and those who kind of,
Didn't think you'd have a job interview question here, did you?
No.
Oh, all right. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think it is a great
Sure.
opportunity, and I think part of what you're going to be learning is really how to break through in this industry. Because while it is kind of a constricting industry in one way, there's there's still a lot of stuff going on, and it's just figuring out how to make it work.
It's a wild new frontier out there, kind of.
It
It's
makes it
changing
fun for a
every
guy
day.
like me, because I'm not a music guy, but I love disruption and chaos and change, and I think I came to the right place in Nashville. And it seems like you certainly found a way to exploit that. So
Well, we're trying, and we're learning. As you said, we're pivoting occasionally, frequently, just kind of going with it, rolling with it, so to speak.
Right.
And to reinforce what Joanna said, and you said too, it's about just being out there every day and finding where the opportunities are. In the old days, I call it, when I started, you just had to you had to know somebody or meet somebody or just knock on doors or do anything you could to make connections. And in one sense, it's still that way. Nothing has changed in that regard. We are trying to offer a new platform for that, or a portal, so to speak. It's kind of like football, it's fundamentals, it's blocking and tackling. Well, in the music business, it's still I wake up every day thinking about the fundamentals. I mean, I'm a song guy, so I look at, okay, what are the things that make a song great, or that make a songwriter great, or an artist great, or have commercial appeals? And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do.
So is there a process where a songwriter has to get past a certain threshold to get approved for your site, or is it that wide open that it's really open to anybody?
Who wants to answer that? Is that for me, or?
I don't care.
I'll take it. No, there's not a particular threshold, and this was a challenge that we struggled with, because it comes.
Because I got a song I wrote back in 1972.
Bring it on.
All right.
Bring it on.
All right.
Quality control is.
And I'm not joking. Although I'm joking about putting it on your site. Yeah.
The quality control is an issue.
Right.
However, we want it to be perceived as kind of what we're fighting against is that perception of the conventional powers that be in the industry have this, I don't want to say they have an elitist attitude, but they do restrict who they allow in through the gate, so to
Sounds like an
speak.
elitist attitude to me.
Yeah. So we want to have the opposite image, in that we are not so discriminating and so judgmental that we're, if you present us with a body of work, we're going to say that one's not good and that one's not good and this one's average. We're not grading your paper, so to speak.
Right.
What I have found, though, and this is one of those surprises, it occurred to me that even in the conventional brick and mortar world, the cream tends to rise to the top.
Right.
So you can go to any of the publishers, Sony, EMI, Curb, whatever, and you can look at their catalog, and some of their songs are not so good compared to some of the others, even though they strive for excellence. But the truth of the matter is, the cream, there's cream, and then there's the rest of the crop.
So what does the rest of the conventional music industry think of you right now? They think you're crazy, or
Probably.
are they scared of you?
That's an interesting question, and I haven't bothered to really try to find out. I suspect if they're paying
Are they
attention.
taking you to lunch?
No, nobody's ringing my phone to take me to lunch too often. I think some of them, because a lot of them are friends of mine and just people, contemporaries of mine that run most of the companies, they know about us. I think they're keeping their eye on us.
I bet.
Either with caution or with maybe an eye to, I've had talks with some people who kind of want to get involved with us at some integrative, is that a word? Integrative level. Because if you think about what we're doing, we initially thought of other publishers as competitors, but I quickly realized that we are kind of like a feeder system for other publishers. And actually, we can save, a couple of them have realized how we could cut down their R&D time, expense, and process and streamline it and almost be like a feeder system for them in a co-venture kind of way.
That makes sense. So are you going to have to raise significant funding to scale this thing, or are you kind of set now for this thing to start cash flowing and sustain itself?
Are you asking me, are we looking for capital investment?
Yes, sir.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
We have gotten to this point with what I would call a modest amount of capital investment. Some of my son Chase and my own little bit of money, and we've raised a little bit of money from a few friends that have invested with us to get us, all of it has gone to website development, catalog acquisition, legal and accounting cost, and patent. We do have a patent pending that we are on schedule for sometime a bit later this year to get our final review, and that's a whole nother.
And that's not cheap.
It's not cheap, and that's a whole, to answer one of your earlier questions, that I had no idea about patent law.
Right.
And I've gotten a great crash course in, that's another thing that politics has weighed in on in the last 2 years. The whole patent process is kind of mind-boggling, and
Right.
so that's where the funding that we got.
So you've kind of proven the concept, and if you don't want to get into details, I respect that. But are you looking at significant funding? Are you bringing in some more individual investors, do you think, or to scale this, are you going to have to bring in more like venture capital that can write the multi-million-dollar check?
Well, we are not actually soliciting. We're not soliciting venture capital. We feel it's a little too soon for that.
Okay.
For us, and they want a little too much.
Yes, they
typically.
do.
We're looking for seed money level.
Okay.
And again, that's not what
So probably industry people who kind of get it
Yeah.
and want to be part of the change.
Or non-industry people who get it, but who have an interest in the music.
Well, that's the
business.
interesting thing about your son's playing this, because when I went into healthcare back in the 1980s, that was a similar kind of time in that industry back then. There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of change, and I didn't know which end of a stethoscope to put in my ears, and yet I could look and see what things were opportunities in that market. And so in some ways, your son coming in with a fresh set of eyes is probably one of the best things that happened. He wasn't stuck in the old ways.
That's right, and none of the handful of people who have invested with us are music industry people at all.
Interesting.
One's a doctor, there's a couple of lawyers, it's no industry people at this point, which is, I find, kind of interesting.
And it may actually be a blessing in some ways, because
Likely.
there might be some baggage that comes in with that, so.
Possible,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. Let's open up and see what kind of questions y'all might have about this. Yeah.
pardon my naivete, I don't study music business. So
That's
I
all
ask
right.
some pretty ignorant questions, but I was interested about what you said about quality control and quality threshold and stuff. And if that threshold is still pretty low, how is it that you don't have a ton more artists rushing to use your service? And like, is that something that that's not something they have to pay for at all?
That's right.
And how have you found the 50 that you have? Did they come to you? Did you seek them out at showcases and things like that, or what?
We've done a little bit of it grassroots here in Nashville, just through word of mouth when we started.
Okay.
Chase lives in Missouri, and there's quite a little active scene in his hometown currently is Springfield, Missouri, where he practices law. And there's quite an active music scene there. He's recruited them. Some of it has, as Chris mentioned earlier, has just been done through word of mouth, through, again, the story the first weekend in January, the national story in the press about us got us a surge of artists. A lot of writers have approached it on a basis of, okay, I think I'll give this a try, and I'll maybe publish 1 or 2 or 3 of my songs and just kind of see what this is all about. Some of them, though, have rushed with, some artists have put a couple dozen, 2, 3 dozen songs at a time because I think they see the potential in it. But I think the quality control question you're getting at is, and I hope I touched on it earlier, if you, for example, wanted to roll the dice and put 10 songs with us, 2 or 3 of them are going to stand out to me and to us, probably. And they're going to get the lion's share of attention because cream does rise to the top. Is that what you
Yeah,
were,
I think
is that
what
your
I'm missing
intent?
is what does the artist have to lose in signing with you, if that's what we're calling it? I mean, like you said time earlier. So is it the exclusivity of your service as opposed to them being free to use other publishers? Is that what they're losing?
If they assign that song, we have exclusive rights to any given song that they publish with us for that period of time.
I just feel like this would blow up like YouTube and everybody would be
Well,
coming at
we
it.
hope that it does.
And then you're gonna have a lot of bad songs.
This is we've invited them in at the very early stage, and they're still kind of getting the concept figured out at this point, which is kind of a cool time to see something like this.
Yeah, we really just launched it, and we started having some showcase events. We had 2 of them that Joanna mentioned in the late fall in December. One in November, one in December, and then the story that broke in January. So we spent last year building our store, so to speak, but we didn't really launch it. It's very in its infancy.
Yeah.
We hope it does blow up like YouTube or Facebook, of course, and get that big in terms of users or people that know about it. They don't have anything to lose except, our pitch to you, for example, is, hey, I'm willing to bet you are not going to have anything else going on. Let us have your songs for a couple of years, and if we can't get you a cut or a placement in a film, or if we can't get you a record deal, or you don't get one on your own working with us in the meantime, in 2 years, you can request, and we are obligated to revert your rights back to you.
So if it does blow up, the filtering, how do you kind of help find the cream of the crop for the people who are coming in? Because I could see if it does blow up, this being an overwhelming site. And
I'm going to rely on Chris and more people like him and Joanne. I'm going to have to hire some staff.
So it's still going to be a personal thing where somebody contacts and say, I'm looking for this kind of thing, what you got? Kind of just like a traditional catalog.
Yeah, we get tip sheets and stuff, and we go
Okay.
through. It's a lot easier now because it's a smaller catalog, but
So you're not looking to
find-
digitize the filtering process?
Well,
Not totally.
not yet, no.
Okay. Any other questions?
How are you able to convince investors to invest in, I guess, what essentially is writers and artists who can't get traditional publishing deals? There are young artists and people who, haven't really, a lot of them haven't even made it to a city where music is a big thing. How are you able to get people to invest in, people who, or writers who haven't really had enough success with their song.
Should I answer that or should? Well, the key word there is convince. We're not really, at the risk of sounding maybe unmotivated from a marketing standpoint, we're not trying to convince people to do anything. We think the music will speak for itself. I mean, we want to attract the investors, as we call them, to the site. So in that extent, we're trying to promote the site, but once at the site, we are relying on what we feel to be people's general interest in music. We're combining social networking fever with Saturday night fever. And hope that the music will speak for itself, and I hope that answers it.
If somebody wants to invest in a song, and I think that's the kind of investing you're talking about, what's the cost? How much does it cost if I, as an accredited investor,
Okay.
And I go through your catalog, I went, God, I like this.
Okay, I'll take about 60 seconds to
All right.
do the detail, if I've got that.
That's all we got, so
Okay.
this will be the last.
We take what our publishing rights, we divide it up into shares, typically 10% incremental shares in a song. And we have a default minimum price of $100 per share.
That's it.
And that's it. Now, we can adjust that price based on certain external factors or whatever to be greater or lesser. But we start at a kind of a default minimum. So you could theoretically buy 50% of a copyright, the publishing rights, for $500. If you came to the site, saw a song that you loved and just were convinced that that's going to be a hit song someday, you could own half of it for $500.
For 2 years.
No, you'll own it in perpetuity.
Oh,
The
okay.
investor will own it just like we will in perpetuity, and because
But just the exclusivity
that
of the
constitutes
site.
activity. That, to jump back to the other side of it, is once there's a cut or a placement in a film or an investment purchased by an investor in a third party, then that copyright becomes integrated into our company and whoever the new owners or owner is
Gotcha.
in perpetuity, and it negates the reversion factor.
Gotcha.
So that constitutes activity.
Forever, that's it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
One more quick question, go ahead.
This is really quick. So as an artist, if I post a song, I wouldn't own any of the publishing.
Correct.
Okay, unless I bought it as an investor.
I'm not sure if you'd want to come on to the site and buy some of your own
Well-
song,
No,
but an investor, yes, you would be conveying your publishing rights to us for that period of time, which again, they'll revert to you unless certain activity occurs, which includes the purchase of it by an investor.
Okay.
But she still retains partial ownership of future revenues?
Her authorship share, the songwriter's share, of
That's what
course.
I think that's what she was asking.
Yeah, in any typical publishing deal, and unless you are way up the food chain and have a track record with activity, you're going to sign an exclusive publishing deal with a publisher where you're going to convey 100% of your publishing rights to that publisher and then retain all of your authorship rights as the writer. But
Right.
so we're doing the same thing in that you're conveying your publishing to us, but we can put money in your pocket without even your song being recorded on a non-recoupable basis if an investor buys a share of your stock. And if not, then the rights revert to you. And you can't find that, I don't believe, in
No, I've
any
never heard of
publisher
that.
in that.
No.
You can't.
No.
That's, again, an attempt to keep it and make it user-friendly.
Well, I could keep going for like an hour or two, but these guys have to get to class, so thank you, Jeff, very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Coleman.